Hello friends and welcome back to my 2016 Game of the Year Awards Megapalooza. Each day I'll be celebrating a variety of my favourite things in video games from the past 12 months. We're here at day 4 now, so we've got 4 more categories on the card, each with 4 games nominated and one of them then chosen as the winner. Of course these are all just my own personal opinions, but if you'd like to share your picks in the comments I would love to hear them. That's more than enough explanation for now, so let's kick things off right away. Best Sounds Design. Devil Daggers. With a single touch from any enemy enough to end your run in Devil Daggers, it's paramount that you know exactly where the danger is at any moment, and sound is a huge benefit in that regard. Being able to quickly pinpoint the location of towers as they spawn in by sound cues alone, or hear the wails of incoming danger from one of your flanks, can help mean the difference between life and death. Its screeches and splats are just as unnervingly horrendous as you want, yet it's not purely about disturbing. There's a real satisfaction to the rattle when you clean out an entire skeletal centipede in one run, for example. Doom. It's tough not to sound like a broken record when it comes to Doom, but everything sounds just how you want it to, and then some. The rocket launcher thuds, the machine gun rattles and chugs in your hands, the shotguns boom resoundingly. Your enemies roar and screech and hiss as they attack, then squelch and splat and squeal as you retaliate. It's not just about the combat though, the load clunks, crackles and hums capture just the right tone during downtime, while the stingers on collecting everything from skull keys to health packs make such phenomenally satisfying noises that even just picking stuff up in Doom is a pleasure. HITMAN. HITMAN is a delightful bouquet of silliness, and the sound direction goes a long way to achieving that. The thuds and bonks as you fling fire extinguishers and other household objects into all and sundry are perfect. The game is packed with small funny snippets of dialogue, but comments like, "Hey, no waiters here," or small remarks such as, "Someone's doing stuff they shouldn't," aren't simply there to elicit a chuckle, they also provide useful information as to what other characters are observing. HITMAN also makes fantastic use of its dynamic soundtrack, fading in music at just the right moments for dramatic effect. Overwatch. Sound is critical in a multiplayer shooter, and Overwatch makes sure to go above and beyond in service of providing useful information to the player through their ears. It's all incredibly smart, from simple touches like the way each character is recognisable by sound cues alone, to more complex techniques, such as the smart sound balancing which weighs out the most important noises to a player's current situation and prioritises those in the mix. It's also just packed with super satisfying sounds, from the whoosh of Pharah's rockets to the wub-wubbing bass of Lucio's beat-dropping ultimate. While all of these games sound fantastic, there's no denying just how crucial Overwatch's audio is to its success. The key to great sound design is that you don't really pay attention to it, because absorbing that oral information becomes second nature without you ever having to be explicitly told what to listen for. It's not just that every character sounds unique, it's that you don't even have to think about who you're hearing. Those uneven clunking footsteps could only mean Junkrat is nearby. That light pitter-patter of feet tells you Trace is in town. That wheezing sound around the corner quickly betrays Roadhog's hiding spot. There are plenty more clever touches here as well, such as each ultimate having a single voice line, so you instantly recognise when justice reigns from above, but then using an alternate voice line for characters on your team so that when a friendly Pharah yells, "Rocket barrage incoming," you know to take advantage and not run for cover. The sounds themselves are superb, which is no surprise coming from Blizzard, but what truly makes it is the ease with which they convey information to the player in a manner that's so natural you don't even have to be taught about it to take advantage. Most Underplayed. Final Fantasy 15. The opening moments I got to spend with Final Fantasy 15 pulled me in pretty quickly, instantly enamouring me to the characters even more than I was anticipating. I even clicked with the real-time combat much more than I had initially expected to, running into some big enemy groups early on which really forced me to get to grips with the flow of encounters. I was looking forward to my road trip with the 4 good boys, and I still am, but ultimately Final Fantasy 15 just arrived a bit too late in the year when I was already deep into several other long games and trying to wrap things up for this very feature. Overwatch. I hopped onto Overwatch's pre-launch open beta weekend and I couldn't put it down. It really felt like a natural evolution of the team-based shooter, I loved the character designs, and I poured hours into the training modes learning the ins and outs of every hero before diving deep into online matches. Yet when the game came out, I played for just a few weeks before closing it one evening and not coming back. There were no bad experiences, I just never had the calling to go and play. Perhaps it was knowing I had no time limit on when I could return, perhaps it was the slower rollout of loot boxes, perhaps other games just kept me distracted. Street Fighter V. I got deep into Street Fighter with the launch of 4, but at the time I was in the perfect scenario, living with a friend who also wanted to learn from scratch. Without that local influence, I was concerned about having to dive online for Street Fighter 5. I actually enjoyed it more than I was expecting to, yet with no arcade mode at launch to get me used to the characters I didn't know so well, I was hesitant to branch out of my early comfort zones despite my everlasting desire to play as every character on the roster. By the time more features were implemented, it felt like I had fallen somewhat behind the curve. Titanfall 2. While Titanfall 2's campaign was brief and to the point in a manner I really appreciated during the busy end of year release cycle, I found myself drawn into the multiplayer but unable to find the time to actually put in. The more varied mechs and open-ended maps made for a fantastically compelling experience, and the AI fodder allowed me to find my footing while I got used to the systems. However, with my focus on finishing single-player campaigns, both to avoid spoilers and to be able to consider them for these awards, I put Titanfall 2's multiplayer on the back burner after a few short hours. But believe me, I will be back. As you might have noticed, a lot of these games really got pushed to one side because I always feel like I can come back to multiplayer modes later once I've wrapped up other campaigns. However, my time away from Street Fighter 5 is my biggest gaming regret of the year. Not only because I felt as though the remaining fanbase had pulled away from me when I came back, but because the times when I have actually popped back in I've had a fantastic time. It's even friendly enough that you really can do okay even with just a grasp on the basics. Thankfully, I was able to spend a few evenings playing against a good friend who had been actually putting the hours in and was able to give me some tips. Even though I was noticeably behind, the matches were still competitive enough to remind me just what a great time local Street Fighter is. I even managed to get my hands on a proper fight stick and make myself want one of those even more. However, while I managed to refresh my memories of the standard roster, some of the game's most interesting characters, including personal favourites of mine Ibuki and Yuri, had come out during my absence, leaving me completely unsure how to handle them. I still had a ton of fun watching Street Fighter 5 this year, but I wish I'd spend more time pummeling faces and getting salty myself. Best game related series or show. Quick heads up that as with the esports category, this is one where I'm not restricting entries to games released in 2016, but rather series which were made during the past 12 months. Giant Bomb plays Hitman. From the very first unfinished video feature for Hitman on Giant Bomb, featuring self-proclaimed stealth expert Dan Reichert guiding an eager but panicked Brad Shoemaker around the tutorial levels, it was clear that this game had a special something and that Brad and Dan were the ideal pairing to bring it out. Watching them plot and blunder their way to spectacular moments of assassination through each of the levels was a joy. The regular rollout of maps and events worked perfectly too, allowing there to be fresh new Hitman content on a consistent basis all the way through the year. Giant Bomb East, Shenmue Endurance Run. With the long-awaited Shenmue 3 now somewhere on the distant horizon, Giant Bomb's East Coast team decided there was no better time than now to jump back where it all began and see what the fuss was about. As it turns out, a better time than now would have been at its release, because while Shenmue had several rather neat ideas at the time, the 16 years that have passed since haven't been too kind to it. Thankfully, the crew of Vinny Caravella, Alex Navarro and Dan Reichert were the perfect trio to find the joy in this bold but bizarre product of its time. Lobos Jr. and LOBROCOP. Lobro plays Dark Souls. Watching someone's first journey through Dark Souls is always something special. The game has become a rite of passage for many, and who better to steer complete series newcomer Brian LOBROCOP via Lobos through than his brother Mike, otherwise known as top Soulsborne Challenge Run streamer Lobos Jr. The pairing works so well because despite being one of the most experienced and knowledgeable Souls players, Lobos has the patience to let his brother figure things out for himself, measuring out his useful reminders and helpful tips with real caution and joy. NOCLIP, Doom Resurrected. 2016 saw longtime GameSpot frontman Danny O'Dwyer launch a new project focused on long-form video game documentaries going behind the scenes of some of the biggest games around. His first project with NOCLIP was a fun delve into the surprise success story of Rocket League, but things got really interesting with his trip to id Software to interview the team about the long troubled development history of Doom. It was fascinating to hear about the ins and outs of a process that somehow led to the successful resurrection of a classic beloved franchise, and one of the finest games of the year. I've long been a fan of Giant Bomb, but I don't think anyone realised quite what we were in for when Brad and Dan sat down for that first video. Hitman is so perfectly suited as a viewing experience. Each level is an open playground packed to the brim with opportunities that you can approach in any direction you want to. There's so much potential packed into every corner that even Brad's natural caution was overcome by his curiosity to see the cool stuff, though the enthusiastic cajoling from Dan certainly helped as well. The core episodes were already a joy, but things got really interesting with the elusive targets, adding a palpable sense of tension to the chaos. Brad and Dan even took to running competitions, with the student taking on the master to see who is truly the most capable and stylish assassin. The real pinnacle of Giant Bomb's Hitman adventures came at the end of the year, however, with Vinny's Hitsmas run, which saw him pull off an implausible knife-hurling kill dressed as international supermodel Helmut Kruger before going on an axe-wielding rampage in the guise of Sheikh Salman al-Ghazali. Watching every single member of Giant Bomb fall in love with Hitman's charm over the course of 2016 was a wonderful experience. Best Story/Writing. Our final category, and with it, unsurprisingly, one final spoiler warning. The nominees in question are Dark Souls 3, Pokémon Sun and Moon, Tokyo Mirage Sessions FE, and Uncharted 4. So if you'd like to avoid hearing specifics from any of those stories, then thanks for watching and I'll catch you in the next episode. Otherwise, let's talk.
Oh dear.
Dark Souls 3. As the first game in the Souls series to make explicit links to past entries, Dark Souls 3 was always going to divide opinion. For me, pretty much all that stuff worked. I liked the way they addressed a few threads of speculation from the first game, but also opened up some new avenues of discussion. It's far from reliant on its referential content, however. Dark Souls 3 still has its own story to tell, and in that regard, comes close to From Software's best. It's also packed full of interesting characters on their own journeys and with their own motives, and I was compelled to seek all of those individual narratives out. Pokémon Sun and Moon. Each generation of Pokémon has gradually ramped up the story content. Sun and Moon offer the most cohesive narrative the series has seen, with a core through line that both has significant impact on the Pokémon universe as a whole, but also resonates on a smaller, more personal level. The way characters fit into the world is smart, with groups feeling less segmented and defined than in past entries. There's no clear-cut good and evil here, rather a wealth of characters with different ideals and motives, who might find themselves allied or at odds with one another, depending on the current situation. Tokyo Mirage Sessions FE. The central story that TMS tells is a pretty straightforward one without too many twists or turns, save perhaps the interesting way they tie the Fire Emblem universe in more directly as the game heads towards its conclusion. But the journey that Itsuki and his friends take is an incredibly fun one to follow. Along the way there are tons of great mini-stories involving each of the characters, and despite the fact that the game was only translated with English subtitles, the writing and humour still shines through thanks to some fantastic work from the localization team. Most of the lineup might be fairly stereotypical character tropes, but they're well executed across the board. Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. Writing in a brother character for Nathan Drake a full 4 games deep into the series and explaining both his absence and Nate's complete failure to mention him previously took some doing, but Naughty Dog pulled it off pretty convincingly. Uncharted 4 ends up being more of a character study than a simple treasure hunting jaunt, with the search for Libertalia simply providing a context in which to explore everyone's personalities, desires and troubles. Ultimately, it all rounds off in a way that might feel a little too sweet, but I think it works in the context of Uncharted as a round-the-world Saturday morning cartoon. It almost feels weird to say this, but we've been slowly trending there over the past 2 decades. A Pokémon game delivered my favourite story of the year. Sun and Moon does a fantastic job of creating a world and story that works on a whole range of different levels, from world-altering revelations to fractured family histories to groups forced together by circumstance. I love the questions that the existence of Ultra Beast poses for the series as a whole. I love the care with which they approach Lily and Gladion's relationship with their abusive mother, and that the writers were prepared to address a difficult subject head on. I love that everyone has their own place in the story, yet none of those places feel one note. Team Skull aren't just stereotypical bad guys, for example, they're a group of outcasts who stick together looking for solace and companionship. While they might put on a tough showing, the Alolan inhabitants seem to know that they're lost souls who are all talk and don't actually pose a serious threat. Each island you visit has its own group of friends, yet characters often pop up again in interesting places and for important reasons, rather than simply being chance encounters. When I completed my journey and got to watch my character celebrating with all the key players, I found myself smiling as I remembered moments I had shared with each and every one of them. And that wraps up the awards for day 4. We're almost done now with all of the award categories wrapped up and only the big one left. So be sure to come back for day 5 where I'll be running down my 10 favourite games of 2016. Thank you for joining me, and be sure to let me know what you thought of the video and if you agreed with my choices or what you would have picked instead in the comments section below. Have a fantastic day and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers!